Okay, let's start. So, how many of us were in my previous talk? Okay, wow, cool, good repeat rate. Or maybe I scared a few people away. Just out of curiosity, how many of us are coming to my workshop tomorrow about AngularJS? Okay, cool. So this talk is about JavaScript debugging tips. It's supposed to be for 90 minutes. I might finish slightly sooner, but we'll see how we go. So I make a lot of mistakes that will probably take longer. So the talk is about JavaScript debugging tips, and debugging is a very important topic because we spend more time debugging than we actually spend writing code because, by definition, debugging is harder. I have 4 talks at this conference. One is a full-day JavaScript workshop that was yesterday. I just finished one breakout session on JavaScript tips. I'm tweeting all my slides. So at the end of this talk, I will tweet all the slides that you will see here as well. So there's no need to take pictures and all the slides, you can download them anyway. Unless you want to take pictures of me, which is totally okay. No. And tomorrow I have a full day AngularJS workshop. I also do trainings and consulting on iOS, Microsoft anything, and JavaScript anything. So with that, let's get started. This talk is about debugging JavaScript because we spend more time debugging, so it's a very important skill to pick up. And with JavaScript, it's even more important because, frankly, JavaScript sucks in a lot of ways. If you attended my last talk, you probably saw that there's so many insidious places that bugs can creep in. And of course, we'll write perfect code, but our teammates might not, of course. So I tweeted this. People thought it was funny, so I put it here on a slide. Said debugging JavaScript is as easy as riding a bike, except the bike is on fire, you're on fire, everything is on fire, and you're in hell. It's not that bad. Because the debugging, the tools have gotten a lot better. As in, the IDE we use to debug JavaScript, it's still the browser. Because it's really the browser that knows the state of your page. So yes, there is Visual Studio that can tap into the browser. But Visual Studio, I think, feels too heavy sometimes to work with JavaScript. And personally, I find myself, debugging JavaScript right inside of, Chrome DevTools or so on and so forth. These days, my favorite is Chrome DevTools. I'm not saying Firefox Firebug is bad or anything. It's just, pick one of those and pick your poison and go with it. Between Safari and Chrome, I think Chrome is far better. But when you're trying to debug, Cordova apps, you have to do Safari. Anyway, so let's get started. Tip number 1, master the console. Console is this interesting object that is built inside of JavaScript. And you just type, say, console dot, and you have, a bunch of methods, error, info, log, warn. But trust me, there's a lot more, especially when you're working with Chrome. And all of those things are useful. So I'm just going to actually run this directly in Chrome. So let's go ahead and launch this, and like that. The idea of console is that whenever I do console.log and say this is some text, it will go ahead and log out that text. Right? And it is much better than alerts for debugging because alerts can screw up your event chain. Right? Because alerts take away the focus, and when you click on that, you've effectively completely messed up the event bubbling chain. So console.log is a better way of doing this. Typically what I do is that you would pass in like a query string parameter to, like error level 0, 1, 2, 3 at 0, don't log anything, 1 little bit more, and so on and so forth. But console.log is actually quite powerful that I can create a new object like this, right? I can say o.firstname is equal to Sahil, o.email address is equal to Sahil Malik at winsmarts.com, and then I can say console.log, and I can pass in the object that I just created, and it'll actually give me an object that looks like an object. Now, if I had more properties here, it'll also show it as collapse, expand. Older versions of Internet Explorer just write object, object. Newer versions of Internet Explorer do write the full object. So this way I can, trace out the entire object. And that's pretty cool. But it goes more than that. Like what I can do with console.log is that I can write %c and I can say this is a rather important message. And at the end, I can say %d number like this. And at the end here, I can specify number 10, but this %c is really interesting because here I can specify CSS like this. Oh, that didn't work. It's supposed to work, but anyway, I might have made a mistake. But theoretically, what you're supposed to see there is that, let's see, maybe I made a mistake. Sorry, where? Ah, I'm a total idiot, you're right. Color, enter, yes. So this way I can make the messages that I'm interested in, I can make those messages stick out. And actually, I think every browser should do this, but if you say go to Facebook and you open the dev tools inside of Facebook, they show you like a big red sign that says stop. If some friend sent you a Facebook trick, don't do it here. This tool is for developers only. So your site, if it cares about XSRF, maybe you want to put such a message over there. Because there's a trick going around Facebook, hit F12, write this funny text, and you'll see some funny status appear on Facebook. But in reality, they stole your identity, right? So that's right. So that is mastering the console. There's a lot more to mastering the console. For instance, there is another interesting method called console.count. And here I can pass in some label, which is a string that is not supposed to change. And every time I call some label, it'll count the number of invocations of some label. So this way I can very easily count how many times any particular label was called or tripped over however many times. So that is console.count. Another really interesting usage of console is console.group. Right? But before I get to that, let me show you another interesting example. So in the same page, I'm going to go to a more real page that has some content on it. Like let's go to The Verge. So The Verge is pretty cool because it's got a lot of images, etc. They have JavaScript errors. I wonder why. They should end this class, but okay. So I want to be able to see how many times has the image element appeared inside of here, right? And I can easily do that using $x. $x is a function that accepts XPath, and it can start at a given start node, but I'm just going to omit that because that's optional. So I'm going to go ahead and say, find me all image tags inside of here. And there's a lot of image tags here inside here apparently, right? Well, there's, okay, just 3, but that's enough for my example. And this is cool, it returns me an array, and that is useful, but then I have to look through each one of these. But let's say if I was trying to create, this, like a list of all the images as text, if I want to, filter that out. So I could do something like this, console.table, x.image, and then I can say, show me the source element. And this can be, comma separated list of more than one. And right here, I was able to format that information like a table. And I can sort this and so on and so forth. Right? So they probably don't have a lot of image tags, but 4 is enough to get us started. And this is cool, so I'm going to save this command. That's useful. But another really useful command that I can use is console.group. Console.group is, so you see that there are 3 examples here, console.group, group collapsed, and group end. What this allows me to do is that it allows me to write console.log messages, but it also allows me to collapse them as necessary. So I can say console.log, this was the first message, console.log, actually let me write this in Notepad. So I'm going to say console.log, this was the first message, console.log, this is the second message, and then I want to write out all the images, and that's going to be a lot of text. So I say console.group, start of the group, and here I'm going to say console.table, console.group end, and like that. And let's go ahead and run this whole thing. if I run the whole thing, number 4 here, I have a bug here. Right. Let's try one more time. And here it says start of group, and I can collapse it, get it out of my way. And just like I had console.group, I also have console.group collapsed if I want to default it to collapsed, right? So again, just a helpful tip, like you can include it in your frameworks where you're logging out a lot of messages. If I want to group the messages from this method separately, and you have the ability to do that. So that is console.group. Next.
Can you do nested groups, or is it?
Yes, you can. There's console.info, console.error, and console.warn. Of course, you can use the CSS thing I showed earlier as well, but each one of these has a little exclamation mark and so on and so forth over here. There's also console.assert, which you can use in TDD. For instance, I can say if 1 equal to 1, then what does this do? Will that be true? It will be true, but if I put triple equal to, it'll be false. So you have console.assert, which you can use for a poor man's TDD. Right? So that's cool. Now, let's talk about performance, because as we write more complicated JavaScript apps, we want to monitor how they're performing inside of the browser. And to be able to do that, I have something called as console.time. Right? Console.time is a function which allows me to pass in a label, and then if I pass in the same label with console.time end, then I have the ability to check how much time was spent between those two invocations. So let's go ahead and write, I'm going to steal some code actually. Let's see now. Yeah, here. So I'm going to steal some code. It looks like this. So console.initialize, and I have an array of 1,000, and for each one of these I'm creating a new object. So it's an operation that's going to take some time, right? And I'm going to take it to Chrome, and I'm going to go ahead and execute this, and you see here that it was able to instantiate all of those objects in 888 milliseconds. And this is pretty useful because you'll find this especially useful in AJAX calls. In fact, I would highly recommend that whenever you're writing a really complex JavaScript framework, all your AJAX calls, wrap them with console.time. The reason you want to be able to do that is because invariably somebody's going to say it is slow, and then you need to be able to pinpoint what is slow. Is it that my DOM is taking too long to render? Is it that the JavaScript parsing is taking too long to render? Or is it that the AJAX calls are too slow? It's a networking issue. And networking issues are really, the hardest to pinpoint on, and this will help you get metrics on that like that. So you can say, really 90% of the time is spent on the network. I cannot optimize it. So, all right, so that is performance. But performance goes a little bit deeper than this. Actually, let me go, no, okay, let's just do this. How much memory am I consuming here? Console.memory. At any point, you can say console.memory, and this will tell you exactly how much memory a certain page is using. As you're allocating more objects, you can keep tabs on this, and you can see exactly how much memory you're using. But then the question is, how much memory am I using on what objects? Like what are the things that are using a lot of memory? And for that, what you need to do is that you need to go to the profiles area, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and hit refresh here. And I'm going to hit start, and then I'm going to hit refresh. And let's see what it does. Start, refresh. And let's see, it's recording, as you can see. So let's wait for the full page to load. And once it is loaded, I'm going to go ahead and stop. And it collects the whole profile. It's sorted by heavy to top right here. And I can click on each one of these, and I can figure out exactly what took how long, which is taking how much memory, and so on and so forth. right there. Now this was a JavaScript CPU profile, so I'm measuring time. But if you saw here in profiles, I can also take a heap snapshot. So let's try and do that. Oh, I should have hit record first. Let's try that one more time. Yeah, so I'm going to take a heap snapshot, take snapshot. That is taking it right now. And this is telling me exactly which objects have been created. So it's telling objects count, shallow size, retained size. So that's the biggest one over here is compiled code. Then there's an array, and there are hidden properties. I can keep diving into that. And bang, bang, bang. That tells me exactly what's taking how much memory. If you have a memory leak, you can find it like this, right? There's also the concept of this profiling, and I am doing this profiling manually. As in, I come in here and I say, go ahead, take a snapshot. You can also initiate this through code using console.profile and console.profileEnd. So you can collect these profiles programmatically also. So that is console.memory, console.profile, and console.profileEnd. Okay. So, interesting so far? Anybody saw anything new, useful? Okay. Yes. Okay. So let's continue. And let's go to a different page. Or actually, this is fine. So, for instance, like if I scroll down here, there's a lot of interesting news here. But let's say if I'm the developer of this website, and I want to be able to see, let me think of a better example. Let me actually go to my Facebook profile. Right. So once this loads up, right, and if you see here, let me maximize this. If I hover over this, for instance, there is a right gear over here. And anytime I go away from here, that guide disappears. And I want to be able to tap into that. Well, let's assume that this was, like you'll see a lot of examples like this menu. And if I want to tap into this, and by the time I'm done with it, the menu disappears, let's say. And I want to be able to quickly zoom into exactly, what is this gear icon and what is it doing? Like what piece of HTML represents it? I can say right click, inspect element. And right there, it points me to the href that was that gear icon. So right inside DOM, I can select that element easily. This works in most modern browsers. By the way, that console thing I was talking about earlier is this, right? So this is a good idea. You should put this in your applications. But anyway, let's come back to elements. The element was selected over here. So this is the element that is selected as of now. I can go to console, and there is a shorthand called $0. $0 immediately points me to the element that is selected. Okay, that's pretty useful. But then I say, given that I have the attention span of a squirrel, I'm going to go ahead and right click on that. That's Flash, never mind. Let's right click on something real. Right, so I select this and then say, well, what was the last element I had selected? Because $0 now has changed, right? $0 is now pointing to the new element. So how do I get to the last element? $1. How about the one before that? $2. How about the one even before that? $3. Yes. And how about the one even before that? No. It stops at 3. So it's $0, $1, $2, $3, and then you're out of luck. But anyway, so another cool related thing to this is that I have selected this element here, right? And frequently this is another common thing we run into. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So this is another common thing that we run into is that I want to be able to find out what happens when I click on this event, okay, or on that link. Because somebody has bound using JavaScript, they bound an event handler to it. And it is so dynamic that I can't figure out that there is no on-click HTML I see there. So I don't know what's going on when somebody hits click on it. And if I edit the HTML, I add on-click, I break that logic. I want to see what element handler, or rather, if anything's even hooked onto it, or what element handlers are being hooked onto. So I can go with this element selected. I can go over here to event listeners. And this tells me exactly what has been connected to it. So apparently Facebook is making use of touch start, which is cool. So the UI is touch friendly. They've given some attention to that. But I can go to say click, and it tells me exactly what has been hooked on to click. There's a right-click hook.js. That's interesting, so I can click on that. So they've tapped into right-click hook, but here is the function. Right-click item is equal to null, so they're preventing you from doing right-click hacks. And then here I can go ahead and set a breakpoint, and then next time I do a right-click, that guy will get hit. It's an easy way for me to tap into these events. I can go into this sources area and start looking at the JavaScripts inside of here. Like there's ng inspector. Hey, look, they're using AngularJS. Nice, good for them. And then I can go down here and look for some bad JavaScript like that. Well, even that is not minimized. Well, I have some minimized JavaScript on my site. So let me go ahead and look for jQuery right there. And I want to understand what this is doing, right? Yeah, that line looks wrong. Well, I really don't know. But what I can do here is I can click this button here. It's called Pretty Print. I can click on that, and it expands it out and makes it a little bit better than what it was. Now, the variable names are still minimized, okay? And there's nothing I can do about that. But still, it is better than trying to debug what I had. Another really cool thing you can do here is when you are debugging this code, you have the ability to right-click on this, and you can say Add Folder to Workspace. So imagine that you're developing a website, and the JavaScript is open in like Notepad or brackets or something like that on the side, and some of the files that you're editing are on the server, some of them are on your local machine, and you want to get some functionality working, or try something out without affecting the server for now. So you have the ability to add local files inside of here, and when you hit Control-S, save on that local file, it will immediately reflect inside of here and make it part of the DOM, and that way you can debug code that's on the server that you have no control on. So that's another really cool trick that we can use. Okay, next there is this tab here called Auditing. And auditing is very, very useful. So what I'm actually going to do, and I've not done this before, this is not rehearsed. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to go to the DevWeek site. And I'm going to see what are the possible ways that DevWeek could improve their site. Just go to Audits, and I'm going to go ahead and say Audit Present State or Reload Page. I'm just going to go with Present State. I'm going to say Run. And it went ahead and analyzed the entire page and said you should leverage browser caching. The following resources are missing a cache expiration. So every time these hits F5, these images are getting downloaded always, right? So that's a possible improvement we could make. Leverage proxy caching, minimize cookie size, parallelize downloads, etc., 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 right? So you can go to any page, run optimize on it, and it'll tell you exactly what needs to be done. So that is called as auditing. And when you do this, it collects these multiple audit profiles, and you can compare them as you make improvements. So that is auditing. The next thing I want to talk about is the network tab. This is the network tab. So look, apparently they are using ng inspector too. Good for them. But over here, as you see here in the network tab, this is showing me all the network requests that were made to run this page. This is, think of it like Fiddler, but built into the browser. And each one of these lines has got more details on it. So it tells me there is this home page, Tobias, like whatever that is downloading. The content download for that took 4.56 seconds. So there's something wrong there. Like we can try and find out exactly what's wrong. There's probably a picture that is getting downloaded from somewhere. We can see why is that taking so long to download if that's a recurring trend. There's an explanation for what each one of these does. I can also go up here, right like that. And I can get these little thumbnails. I have the ability to filter, like if I want to find a particular request, I can do that. I can choose to filter this out as in don't show me images, don't show me media. I'm interested in only say, let's say Ajax requests, for instance. I can choose to stop recording because sometimes these pages are dynamic. They keep loading afterwards as well. Like Facebook will just keep going because behind the scenes it's making Ajax requests even after the page is downloaded. So you can say stop recording, start recording, so you can measure things like that. And also there's a timeline up here, there's a seconds log up here, so it tells me exactly how long a page took to load. And there are these two interesting looking lines here. There's a blue line here, DOM content loaded event. And then there's a red line here let's see if I can, and there's a load event. And the difference between the two is that the line on the left is document.load and the line on the right is document.ready event. So the page will look like it's loaded at the blue line and it'll become functional at the red line. So if you want to give the perception to the user that the application is more functional than it really is, you can probably try and minimize this and load these resources asynchronously afterwards. That's a common trick we use. So these lines that I talked about, there is an explanation for each one of them. Like these colors, it's all color coded, and you're going to get a copy of these slides so you can read exactly what those lines are doing. Right? So what each one of these blocks represent. So that's the timing block. The next trick is about the debugger statement. So if I have, if I want to set a breakpoint here, I can just write debugger, okay, and I can go ahead and run this. And if the dev tools are open, just go and refresh. Whenever I write debugger, it'll stop right there. So this is another useful trick where I have the ability to inject a breakpoint programmatically. I'm going to remove this and refresh this page. Come on, refresh. Okay, let's go ahead and kill the process. You have to love it when Chrome decides to not cooperate with you. But anyway, I can show that here. So I can go to sources, assets, and let's go look at this JavaScript. And I can go ahead and set a breakpoint here, for instance. And another interesting thing that I can do with this is that I can right click on this, right? And I can say edit breakpoint. So there's obviously continue to here, remove, disable, but there's an interesting one called edit this breakpoint. And in edit this breakpoint, I can start writing expressions here. And with these expressions, I say line this will be hit only if this expression is true. So I can programmatically tap into the variables that are available at that time. And this is really useful. Like say if you're trying to debug a while loop and you're trying to see when does a problem occur. It's on iteration number 238. So you do F10, 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 F10. Right around when you're at 235, there's a squirrel and you miss the breakpoint, right? So you can set the breakpoint where you want and try and hit it programmatically, and that's very, very useful. Okay, cool. Next, let's talk about try catches in JavaScript. Try catches in JavaScript are also quite useful. Try catches in JavaScript allow me, it's just like try catch you would expect it in like say C#. So you have the ability to throw an exception just like any other language. And what that allows me to do is that the catcher of the exception can include a call to your code in a try catch like this. But remember, try catches in JavaScript are very expensive, so use them sparingly. A lot better approach is to just tap into the window.onError object, right? But anyway, if you do need to use try catches, the important thing in JavaScript is I'm saying throw new error. You don't have to do it like this. You can throw anything. You can throw a number. You can throw a string. You can throw a custom object. Right? What is important is that your caller needs to understand what you're throwing. That's the important part. But other than that, you can throw anything. Secondly, whenever you do a throw, and this is where you may want to use one browser over another, the error object in Firefox will tell you exactly what file the error occurred in and what line number the error occurred in. And newer browsers also have a property called error stack. So if you do run into an error, you can actually walk the stack and you can see exactly where did the call come from. Unfortunately, it does not catch all the parameter values. To catch the parameter values, you have to actually debug. But still, the fact that it tells you exactly where the code came from is better than nothing. Right? And obviously try catches are expensive. So that's about try catch. Next. Sometimes you have an uncaught exception. An error is occurring, but you just don't know where it's coming from. So in Visual Studio, under the debug menu, there's a choice called exceptions, and there are a bunch of checkboxes that are unchecked. And you're getting an error, your program is exiting soon as that error occurs. And this is especially useful in multi-threaded applications, because the calling thread, sometimes people don't write it properly, and the calling thread just gives you a generic error rather than what the real error message was. So sometimes you want to be able to say, I know I didn't put a try catch around that, my bad, but the code is in production now. But soon as an error occurs, stop right there. Hit a breakpoint right there. And that is what this checkbox allows you to do. Pause on uncaught exceptions. Where do you find this? You go to Chrome DevTools, and this guy here, pause on uncaught exceptions. So as soon as an error occurs, it'll stop execution right there. So that's also very, very useful. And that is tip number, I forgot. The next useful thing is break on DOM changes. You have the ability to basically go into anywhere here. I'm going to say right-click, inspect element, and right-click, break on, node removal, attribute modifications, subtree modifications. Right? So you have the ability to tap into any time there is a change that occurs in the DOM, you have the ability to hit the breakpoint right then. So there's some JavaScript that is messing with this string. Okay, I want to find out, and you can find out using this. Right, so that is another interesting debugging tip. Break on DOM changes. Similarly, you also have the ability to break on AJAX calls. How do you discover that? Again, let's go into Chrome DevTools. Let's go into the script right here. And just like you had this over here, so I'm going to actually get rid of this breakpoint. There's something called XHR breakpoints. Hit this plus button. And this actually will take even a regex expression, or you can type in like a certain URL. Say don't break on every XHR request. Break on the XHR request that I'm interested in. So like calling my AJAX endpoint. And then before that call is made, it will stop right there. Right? And then when it stops right there, you can set breakpoints in the success and the fail handlers, and then you can continue from there. So that's another interesting tip. Okay. Next tip. Conditional breakpoints, I already talked about that. But the interesting thing is that the conditional breakpoints, not only that you can return something that is true, you can also put like a full function inside of here. So what that effectively allows you to do, it can say break here and then continue execution over there based on some programmatic logic. You have the ability to do that as well. You can easily repeat an AJAX call. So any of these requests that you saw in the network tab, let's go back here. Network tab and look at any one of these requests. Hey, that's me. So that's cool. I can say right click and copy as curl. So curl is this command line tool that allows me to basically do a REST call easily using command line API. It's built into Unix. It's a very popular tool. And I have the ability to copy any request as a curl request, or I also have the ability to replay XHR. You'll find this useful like where you are in authenticated scenarios and you want to replay a request under the logged in user's credentials. Like you can replay a request through Fiddler. But let's say if you're using NTLM authentication, the new request from Fiddler is going to try to re-authenticate. Obviously, Fiddler cannot show you a user interface to authenticate you again, so it's just going to fail. It's going to give you a 401. But if you did it through the browser like this, then you have the ability to redo an authentication call in the current authentication context. Right? So that's also a very, very useful thing. Right. Cache is your enemy. Well, no, not the CASH. That's your friend. But browser cache is your enemy. But these days, when we're writing, occasionally connected applications, we're making use of a lot of cache. So what do? We go to the private mode to avoid cache, right? Private mode is great. It'll avoid browser cache, but it doesn't get rid of local storage. So here's another interesting tip. With the dev tools open, like that, just a second. With the dev tools open, what you can do is that you hold the control key down and then you hit this button. And then you see this menu that allows you to empty cache and do a hard reload. In HTML5, there is a standard called the manifest.xml where you can say that if I am offline, load pages from cache. And that is unbelievably hard to debug. Because anytime you hit F5, you don't know if the pages are coming from cache or if they're coming from the server. It is unbelievably hard to debug that. But this will help you get around that problem. So that's a hard reload. That's very, very useful as well. And this is another issue. Like, how many times have you run into this scenario that you're debugging and you're like, my function, then jQuery, then my function, and then jQuery, and then my function. As I'm debugging, before I know it, I've gone into jQuery. And I'm debugging minified code, which I don't understand, waiting to get back into my code. I don't know how long it'll take, so I keep patiently hitting F10. When it gets back to my code, I miss it, right? So there is a way to black box libraries in which we can say, these libraries never go into them from a debugging point of view. Don't debug through them. Like, in .NET, we have the debugger step through attribute, something like that. The way we do that is first you go to Chrome://flags. So let's do that. Chrome://flags. And then you search for developer. And it says enable developer tool experiments and enable it. I've already enabled it, so I won't do it again. But once you've enabled it, then you restart Chrome. Then you go to any one of your favorite sites. You open the DevTools again. And then you click on this gear, that is the settings icon. Can I make this any bigger? No. And then you go down here, manage framework black boxing. And you click on that, and here now I have the ability to black box or disable the debugging of any of libraries based on whatever pattern match. And that's another cool way for me to be able to, not have to debug into libraries that I don't understand anyway. And this is a trick that I mention like every time I talk about JavaScript, and this is called as monkey patching. And monkey patching is really, really interesting because what this allows me to do is that it allows me to take the definition of an existing function. Because remember, in JavaScript, functions are just variables. So I can manipulate them however I wish. I can overwrite them. There's no concept of that this is a read-only variable. There's nothing like that. Well, there's const, but it doesn't work for functions. So you got function add AB, return A plus B. That's a function. Somebody's written it, and I cannot change that. But what I want to be able to do is that I want to be able to have my code run either before or after that code runs. For instance, I want to log all the values going into that, right? So here what I can do is that I can take var original add is equal to add. So remember, a function is just a variable. So I basically took this and I took the value of the original add and I saved it. Then I can say redefine what add means. I'm going to say add is equal to brand new function, and I'm console.logging out all the arguments that were passed in. And then I say return original add.apply. That's another shorthand for me to be able to call a function. And then I can say this arguments. And then what that'll do is that it'll call add for me. And then when I actually run add, you will see that the inputs to add get console.logged. And then I see the return value from add. So this is a way for me to be able to tap into, like say if there's a jQuery function, and like say you got $http.post, and my server is returning this, but in my code I'm getting something else. So there's a transformation occurring somewhere. So can I tap into like what exactly am I sending the server? Is it that the server is a transformation somewhere in my JavaScript logic? And then I can tap into that, look at exactly what the request was, replay it from somewhere else, and then I'll be able to see exactly what kind of request was sent and log it out and so on and so forth. So this technique is called as monkey patching. Okay. Anything useful so far as far as debugging goes? Okay, cool. That's all I have. So I know I finished a little bit before time, but quite a lot before time actually. But well, so that's all I have. But thank you very much. I hope you found this useful. Yes.
Good question. You had the console protocol.
Console dot what?
Memory protocol.
Mm-hmm.
What other browsers does that work in? Or is that just different?
Console.memory does not work in like Safari. Internet Explorer has it, Firefox has it, but Safari is becoming the new IE6. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, it's true. Like, now that the Internet Explorer brand is dying, we have to find something to make fun of. So I think I'm betting on Safari being the next candidate for that. Because every other browser is also self-updating, and they're supporting all the standards, and Safari is just, it's the last one to implement any standard. So, yeah. Like if you go to, let me open Safari, for instance. So this is also built on WebKit, right? So is Chrome. But let's go ahead and look at the dev tools for this. Even though they look prettier, but there is so much lesser functionality in this. Like timelines, there is no memory profiling in this. Because say in Chrome, I have the ability to do this. I can go into timeline, I can trace memory, okay? I'm going to hit the record button, and let's hit refresh, for instance, right? Let it record. I should have checked JS Profiler as well, but anyway. So that thing's loaded, stop record, and you see here that there's like an amazing amount of information. It's like this blue line is the JS heap size, and that is going up, and then it tells you that, like if I want to trace exactly what happened here. So I can, zoom in here, and if I zoom in, like if I look deeper in this, it's kind of hard to do this in low resolution. But yeah, this is the guy that I was looking for. And if I basically like see here, it'll tell me like exactly where the garbage collector kicked in as well. Right? So it tells you, say, what exactly was happening here. It's an event add. And there's an amazing amount of instrumentation built here. Whereas Safari has nothing like this. I can filter these like this. I can manually trip the garbage collector by clicking this icon. There's a lot here. And believe me, you're going to need it. If you're going to write a complex JavaScript app, you're going to need these things. Safari has nothing like this. Safari, looks pretty, but it has nothing like it. So, yeah, Safari is the one that's like most favorite. Most other browsers have this. But still, like, mostly, like, if you're writing this in your libraries, you should always check the existence of a function before you call it on console.
What's the name of the JavaScript editor you use?
Brackets. And brackets is really, really cool. It is written using JavaScript. That's the weird thing. It is written using JavaScript. So as I'm writing this, like say if I write functions, I have these snippets. There's a custom function and a comma b, let's say, right? So over here I can say return a plus b. This is my favorite function for some reason. And then down here I can say custom functions, which gives me IntelliSense. So it is parsing my page while I'm writing it. And then I can say custom function, and let's see if this works. Function name, okay, like that. So I just hit Command E, and this also works on like Windows, and it brings that other function. This could have been in another file, for instance, and it sort of shows me the function right here. I can look at it or I can edit it. And now, where is this useful? imagine if I was using Bootstrap. And Bootstrap has got these hundreds of CSS files. And this quick edit works with all the CSS files as well. So if I'm inside of an element and say, well, this looks weird, how does that look like? Like what CSS is defining this element? Command E, and it brings that in. And then I can edit it right there, or I can define a new class to match what I'm trying to do. So that's really useful. Another cool thing that brackets does is that as I'm writing this, so I can say document dot write line custom function A1 2 like that, okay? So I can do this and I can hit this button here. This is live preview. And so it writes 3 and that's pretty cool, but I'm going to go ahead and set these side by side. In low resolution it's a little hard, but let's try anyway. So I'm going to change this to, let's say, 4 save. See, changed it live over here. And that's cool. But then if I have like complex HTML, I can, as I'm typing stuff inside of here, it'll also highlight what section am I working on the right side. That's another nice thing I like about brackets. Another cool thing about brackets is it's got a lot of these plugins or themes and so on and so forth. So for instance, and they all come from like GitHub, etc. And you can update them directly inside of here. It'll tell you what needs updating. So a few ones that I am actually using are HTML lint. So it tells me there's one error here. Well, that's a different thing. But if I was to, let's try. I don't know if this will work or not, but let's try. So yeah, it's actually working. So say that there's a mismatch tag that it tells you right here that there's a problem. So let's say that I'm going to actually create a problem on my own. So like that. So it tells you exactly where the problem is. So I can go ahead and fix this. Problem goes away. I have code folding available inside of here, so I can collapse expand these. It works in JavaScript too, works in CSS too. When I'm writing CSS, it gives me previews of whatever I'm writing. A lot of other reasons. I think brackets is pretty fantastic. Written by Adobe, and it's absolutely free. And there are these extensions. If you look through them, there are extensions available for TypeScript. There are extensions available for Ionic. Ionic is this framework built on top of AngularJS that is targeted to write HTML5 or Cordova apps for the iOS platform. And it is so good that you actually cannot tell the difference between a native app. And you might have heard this claim over and over again, that it is so good you can't tell the difference between native and HTML5, but most of the times you can. But Ionic is really that good that it actually looks and feels exactly like a native app. It really does. And there is an extension available for Ionic in here. There's an extension available for AngularJS. There's an extension available for TypeScript, for Bootstrap. So all of the helpers are built inside here as well. Plus, this supports like every single language you care about. On Mac especially, like the editor, text edit, is not, I don't like it that much personally, because I feel it's too like heavy. So I use, there's another free one called Notepad, but it doesn't give you syntax highlighting. So anytime I want to open code, I would open it in brackets. It automatically, makes it syntax highlightable, collapse, expand, and all of that. So it's a pretty good editor, and for free, it's pretty good. Brackets.io, that's the site you can download it from. So, yeah, it's a good editor. I like it. Any other questions? Cool. So, who's coming to my Angular? Yes.
Do you have any debugging tips for specific frameworks like Angular or Knockout?
All of these tips apply. Angular, unfortunately, it's really up to your JavaScript tips, really. There is a little extension I use for Chrome. It's not very useful, but it's better than not having anything. And if you come down here, you might have, no, it's here. Here, this guy here. So if I click on that here, it tells you that if it was using AngularJS, and it'll tell you like what attributes are being used, how many times something was called. So it gives you some insight. But really, it's plain JavaScript debugging tips that apply best over there. The framework specific, there's not much over there. I mean, in Angular especially, one of the challenges I run into is that if you have declarative code, like here's a directive and I'm using it completely declaratively, it's not in code. Debugging declarative code sometimes can become hard because there's no breakpoint there. But that's a problem with declarative code in general. So that's, but yeah, there is no Angular specific debugging thing over there. It's your regular JavaScript that's useful. Regular JavaScript debugging tricks. Yeah. There's some other tricks I have for like Cordova apps, but I don't know how applicable they are, but cool. iOS, Microsoft anything, and JavaScript anything. So with that, let's get started. This talk is about debugging JavaScript because we spend more time debugging, so it's a very important skill to pick up. And with JavaScript, it's even more important because, frankly, JavaScript sucks in a lot of ways. If you attended my last talk, you probably saw that there's so many insidious places that bugs can creep in, and of course, we'll write perfect code, but our teammates might not, of course. So I tweeted this. People thought it was funny, so I put it here on a slide. It said, debugging JavaScript is as easy as riding a bike, except the bike is on fire, you're on fire, everything is on fire, and you're in hell. It's not that bad. Because the debugging, the tools have gotten a lot better. As in, the IDE we use to debug JavaScript, it's still the browser. Because it's really the browser that knows the state of your page. So yes, there is Visual Studio that can tap into the browser. But Visual Studio, I think, feels too heavy sometimes to work with JavaScript. And personally, I find myself, debugging JavaScript right inside of, Chrome DevTools or so on and so forth. These days, my favorite is Chrome DevTools. I'm not saying Firefox Firebug is bad or anything. It's just, pick one of those and pick your poison and go with it. Between Safari and Chrome, I think Chrome is far better. But when you're trying to debug, Cordova apps, you have to do Safari. Anyway, so let's get started. Tip number 1, master the console. Console is this interesting object that is built inside of JavaScript. And you just type say console dot, and you have a bunch of methods, error, info, log, warn. But trust me, there's a lot more, especially when you're working with Chrome. And all of those things are useful. So I'm just going to actually run this directly in Chrome. So let's go ahead and launch this, and like that. The idea of console is that whenever I do console.log and say this is some text, it will go ahead and log out that text. Right? And it is much better than alerts for debugging because alerts can screw up your event chain. Right? Because alerts take away the focus, and when you click on that, you've effectively completely messed up the event bubbling chain. So console.log is a better way of doing this. Typically what I do is that you would pass in like a query string parameter to, like error level 0, 1, 2, 3 at 0, don't log anything, 1 a little bit more, and so on and so forth. But console.log is actually quite powerful that I can create a new object like this, right? I can say o.firstname is equal to Sahil, o.email address is equal to Sahil Malik at winsmarts.com, and then I can say console.log, and I can pass in the object that I just created, and it'll actually give me an object that looks like an object. Now, if I had more properties here, it'll also show it as collapse, expand. Older versions of Internet Explorer just write object, object. Newer versions of Internet Explorer do write the full object. So this way I can, trace out the entire object. And that's pretty cool. But it goes more than that. Like what I can do with console.log is that I can write %c, and I can say this is a rather important message. And at the end I can say %d, number like this. And at the end here, I can specify a number 10, but this %c is really interesting because here I can specify CSS like this. Oh, that didn't work. It's supposed to work, but anyway, I might have made a mistake, but theoretically what you're supposed to see there is that, let's see, maybe I made a mistake. Sorry, where? Ah, I'm a total idiot, you're right. Color, enter, yes. So this way I can make the messages that I'm interested in, I can make those messages stick out. And actually, I think every browser should do this, but if you say go to Facebook and you open the dev tools inside of Facebook, they show you like a big red sign that says stop. If some friend sent you a Facebook trick, don't do it here. This tool is for developers only. So your site, if it cares about XSRF, maybe you want to put such a message over there. Because there's a trick going around Facebook, hit F12, write this funny text, and you'll see some funny status appear on Facebook. But in reality, they stole your identity, right? So that's, right. So that is mastering the console. There's a lot more to mastering the console. For instance, there is another interesting method called console.count. And here I can pass in some label, which is a string that is not supposed to change. And every time I call some label, it'll count the number of invocations of some label. So this way I can very easily count how many times any particular label was called or tripped over however many times. Okay, let's start. So how many of us were in my previous talk? Okay, wow, cool, good repeat rate. Or maybe I scared a few people away. Just out of curiosity, how many of us are coming to my workshop tomorrow about AngularJS? Okay, cool. So this talk is about JavaScript debugging tips. It's supposed to be for 90 minutes. I might finish slightly sooner, but we'll see how we go. So I make a lot of mistakes that will probably take longer. So the talk is about JavaScript debugging tips, and debugging is a very important topic because we spend more time debugging than we actually spend writing code because, by definition, debugging is harder. I have 4 talks at this conference. One is a full-day JavaScript workshop that was yesterday. I just finished one breakout session on JavaScript tips. I'm tweeting all my slides. So at the end of this talk, I will tweet all the slides that you will see here as well. So there's no need to take pictures, and all the slides, you can download them anyway. Unless you want to take pictures of me, which is totally okay. No. And tomorrow I have a full-day AngularJS workshop. I also do trainings and consulting on